with everybody. I surround myself with smarter people and then just, help them showcase the work that we've done together. I'm the guy on the news.
Just be the face.
That's all I need to be. That's the gig
speaker.
I'm looking for, Nick. I just want to be the face of, a figurehead. I don't want any power. I don't want any influence. I just want to be the guy who you roll out, you put the lights on, and he goes, this is really important what we do. And then you just put him back in his little cocoon and he watches SpongeBob and that's it.
You need a director of communications job or something like that.
Some kind of not real role. I need to be some kind of figurehead that doesn't really exist. So, but it's fascinating stuff. And so if you're out there, listener, and you've noticed in your work relationships or in your projects and things like that, even in family mode, or even just in neighborhood mode or community projects or nonprofit work, if you've ever had that irky feeling of somebody not pulling their weight or contributing something or bleeding for this too, it turns out that may be instinctively woven into your psychology to have beef with that, even to the point where you'll spend your stickers to stop that person from doing it. And I think when you take that study, Nick, and you unfold that to the larger world that we live in and America and politics, I think it's the heart and soul of a lot of the debates that we have. Where one side of the political aisle is talking about not leaving behind people that don't have much to contribute to the national wealth, and the other side kind of saying maybe we do leave them behind, or less be interested in them. And that's the great debate that seems to be happening. It turns out it happens at an instinctive level.
I wonder how desensitized we get, and if that's a factor over the years. How, the 4-year-olds, when they noticed that the child had some kind of reason, some kind of justification for not being able to contribute, they were willing to pick up the slack.
Right.
And I wonder if over time people just become desensitized to that and they stop believing excuses. And
isn't that really interesting? Because at the 4-year-old level, they're pissed whenever you don't pull your weight, but if there's a good reason for why you couldn't, they're totally fine with it. At the 9 and 10-year-old level, they're less pissed when you don't pull your weight. They kind of don't care. They do still care, but it was a much less stark reality of how many of them were upset whenever you didn't kick in your chocolates or whatever economy they did for them. And they were also less likely to kick out stickers to punish you, right? They were able to sort of move away from it and think as an individual. Me personally, the damage has already been done. If you get a slice of cake, that doesn't necessarily bother me because I got my cake. And so they're able to sort of think differently. So it is interesting to watch human psychology sort of unfold, that it's almost super primitive of us to have beef with the freeloader. It's almost an enlightened and more evolved path to look at the freeloader and say, yeah, but his existence doesn't harm mine, right? His slack is more than made up for by the team, and I still get a slice of cake. So I don't necessarily need to spend my own stickers to get that. If you watch that 4-year-old behavior where they're spending their stickers to punish the freeloader, if you're just being mathematical about that, that's not logical.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. It in no way improves your advantage to spend your stickers to take back something from the freeloader.
Right.
You've actually lost something to stop him from getting cake. Isn't that interesting?
It's crazy.
It is. So human beings are fascinating, but 4-year-olds at Yale are teaching us a lot about ourselves. So
we should have more 4-year-olds.
Yeah, that's the deal. We need more 4-year-olds getting into Yale. They just lower that bar, just let these kids in.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have some listener mail about mental health issues causing feelings of loneliness. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our first listener mail comes to us from our listener Alpaca Scoop, who's dealing with anxiety and loneliness. Here's the letter. Feeling lonely because of anxiety. I'm a 34-year-old, happily married mother of 2, and I feel alone. I have panic disorder, borderline personality disorder, and major depression. I took Paxil from 15 until freshman year of college, which I kicked by detoxing for a week, sweating in my bedroom. After this, I developed a ton of phobias, which exacerbate the panic disorder. I feel like I have no connection to any adults outside of my husband, and it makes me feel profoundly lonely. I can't seem to get anyone to regard me with respect or attention, and it makes me retreat further into my depression. When I do try to connect with people, they either seem to forget about me or ignore me completely. My husband has a couple of friends, but I can't seem to make any. I want to share my hobbies and interests with people, but outside of people on Facebook, it's like nobody cares. The other problem I have is in trying to join meetup groups. Things just don't seem to fit for one reason or another. The mom groups meet during the middle of the workday, and the other groups may have more favorable meetup times, but my anxiety makes me very nervous about meeting new people and showing them that side of myself, as historically, people have not been understanding and have mostly judged me. Also, the anxiety makes it so I can't eat at night or do too much at night, or it might get set off and I can't risk having a panic attack. All this isolation makes me feel sad and angry, which makes me feel overwhelmed by even relatively small problems, and it makes me distant from my family, which makes me feel like a terrible mom and wife. I avoid, ignore, or yell at the kids and my husband, which I hate doing. But thanks to thyroid disorder, I also get exhausted and just don't have the energy to fight through the mood. I can't seem to get myself out of this cycle. I've tried therapy, but as far as I can tell, it's an expensive exercise in wasting my breath. I describe my myriad of issues and they nod, give almost useless advice, and this goes on until I realize how pointless and expensive the sessions are and stop going. I like your show, but I'm mostly sending this in because my husband thinks it's a good idea, but I'm skeptical. So, how does one overcome all this baggage and find happiness and balance? Thanks. Alpaca Scoop.
Well, thanks for writing in, Alpaca Scoop.
Yeah, thanks for overcoming the skepticism.
Yeah, this is a good one to deal with because I think a lot of our listeners can probably relate to this.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the first things I thought of, if I understand this correctly, you were on medication, you were on Paxil, then came off of it, and then it sounds like things got worse after that. Mm-hmm. I may have misunderstood that, but if that's the case, right off the top of the bat, right off the top, I'd think maybe looking at doing some kind of medication, meeting with a psychiatrist or your family doctor and trying out some meds. I'm not a big one that likes to push meds.
Right.
I'm more of a behavioralist. I want to try to have behavioral interventions and try to do that stuff first. Use talk therapy first. But if none of that is working and medication is an option and it's a tool that is available to you, then maybe that would be a start. And it doesn't have to be something that's going to be a permanent thing, but it can be something that is going to just give you that extra little boost that you need to work through some of these other issues. Because I do hear a lot of just kind of this spiraling effect where it's one thing that is frustrating and difficult to deal with, and then that leads to stress in other areas of life, which then circle back into me having feelings of not being a good mom or wife, and so on and so forth. And just kind of, it's this perpetual feeding.
Yeah, and a couple of notes on that. So, one of the things Alpaca Scoop says toward the end is, listen, I think it's going to be useless to write to you guys, but my husband is...
Probably.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you're both right. Congratulations. Yes, we almost exclusively end up as useless. But, a couple of things that I noted in this. She actually identifies 4 disorders in her writing, right? Mm-hmm. 4 things that she comes up in front and says, I'm aware these exist. I'm aware I have panic disorder. I'm aware I have borderline personality disorder. I'm aware I have major depression. And then later in the letter, she says, I'm also aware I have thyroid disorder. So I want to take a second for the audience to first unpack those. Obviously, Alpaca's looking into this. She knows what this is. Her husband knows what this is. But this letter is only helpful if other people can relate. So let's unpack some of that. So let's start with panic disorder. Panic disorder is like anxiety disorder, except it explodes, and it's more acute. So when we think of chronic, which is long-term, and it might be mild, versus acute, which is extremely strong and lasts in a very explosive way, that's panic disorder. So panic is whenever you ball up all that anxiety and it pops, and you have what's called a panic attack, which is like a paralyzing fear of losing your mind. You feel like you're going crazy. You feel like you're going to die sometimes. And it's stunning in the sense that you're offline, like you're sort of incapable in the moment of dealing with it, and it can be sort of a frozen challenge. Borderline personality disorder is different in that, first off, I want you to catch those last 2 words there, personality disorder. So in our work in mental health, we classify the things that we call disorders into different boxes. Panic disorder is what we call a mood disorder, right? Borderline personality disorder, as you might suspect, is inside of a box that we call personality disorders. A personality disorder is a little bit different because it's by its nature very chronic. It isn't acute like panic would be. It's sort of a pattern. And it's this pattern that we see play out in your life. And it might be confused as, well, this is just who I am. But we call it a disorder because we believe that actually this pattern of behavior is something that can be corrected. It can be challenged. And if we don't, it causes significant harm in your life. So borderline personality disorder, and Nick, you might have to add some color to this page. My understanding of what borderline is a person who has very poor basic human boundaries. So that's usually somebody who connects deeply and fiercely too quickly, and somebody who explosively pushes people away and might have a very acidic and angry reaction to them. Almost like bipolar disorder in the sense that they seem to have a flip sort of mood switch. But I believe that borderline has a lot to do with the way they humanly interact with others.
Yeah. I hate you, don't leave me.
That's it. There it is. I hate you. I can't live without you. And so it's very confusing.
Yeah, and I've seen it mostly in youth that I've worked with in the past. Youth that had, for whatever reason, never had a strong bonding with a parent or an adult figure.
Yes.
So maybe they were in foster care and they got moved from house to house. And it really messes with someone's psyche because it feels like I can't get close to people because something bad will happen. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I have this relationship. I feel like I'm getting really close. Therefore, you're probably going to leave me. And I would, if that's going to happen, I want to be the one to end it. So
there's a lot of self-sabotage that we tend to see in borderline personality disorder. And that self-sabotage and that relationship sabotage frequently causes so much distress that they'll come see a therapist, will evaluate the pattern and go, oh, this looks like BPD. And then the third thing out of the four that she identifies is major depressive disorder. Most of our listeners are pretty familiar with that at this point. Major depression is whenever you can click all those boxes of feeling anhedonic, which means you've lost pleasure in your life. You can't enjoy the things you used to. You may feel hopeless, feel like there's no future. You can feel like you're in this dark cloud of just lack of energy, inability to get motivated to do things, and just be lost in it. And sometimes it can even be accompanied by suicidal thinking or self-harm thinking. All that kind of comes with it. And then the fourth thing that she identifies is thyroid disorder. Thyroid disorder is a little bit more interesting because thyroid disorder has to do more with your medical body, the hardware versus the software. Panic, borderline, and major depression are very much in the software box of things that Nick and I are going to try to work on because we're sort of basically brain tech support. Our job is to sort of recode the way that your programs run in a very soft way. You can't see the difference physically. We get into the code and we change the little numbers into new things. Thyroid disorder is a hardware thing. You can see the malfunctioning organ, the thyroid. And in this case, it's usually producing too much of a biochemical that induces anxiety and causes like elevated levels of cortisol, the inability to calm down. Whenever I meet somebody who comes to me for anxiety treatment, I usually want them at some point to go get a blood test with their primary doc to check for thyroid disorder. It's a simple blood test that we can do, and it's very rare that it pops up, but I've seen it happen. And when that happens, medication really is your only and best option because I can recode you all day long. The hardware doesn't do the thing that you want it to do, right? And so we have to overcome that. So she's got a mix of physical stuff going wrong and mental health stuff and relationship stuff. And so what's interesting about this is back in the day, Nick, we used to classify things by axis. Remember that? We had axis 1, axis 2. And it was sort of like these little line by lines of how we would identify the kinds of problems the person has. In this case, she's got the trifecta. She has a physical malfunction. She has a software problem in the panic and depression, and she has a personality disorder as well. So it's really difficult to start with. And Alpaca, as we now pivot back to you, I want to first identify that, wow, my friend, you have a cloud of stuff. And so when I detect this tone throughout your letter of discouragement, of feeling sad, of feeling skeptical at this point, of feeling jaded and cynical, and feeling like even therapy itself was a waste in some ways, and getting medicine. I gave up on the